on the rest of the war, which I'm going to skip, and I think I'm going to go straight to the Dumbos. But in any case, so one of the Japanese countermeasures to read, they're desperate to stop the destruction of critical shipping by the PBYs. The Japanese rerouted their ships dangerously close to the west coast of New Ireland. Next slide will tell you why, but never mind. They stopped forward progress of a ship when an aircraft was heard so as to eliminate the telltale wake of the ship. One of the ways the Catalinas, apart from the radar, was to go visual on the wave that it made, the wake. And so they simply throttled back and stopped in the water and we won't make a wake anymore. That was one way to counter it. And then the last sentence, the enemy also developed small diversionary vessels with heavy armament which reflected radar blips, falsely indicating battleship size targets. So they tried to confound the radar, and they would go for the wrong aircraft. Okay, then this one, perhaps the most effective defensive tactic the Japanese employed was to hug the shorelines. This often enabled them to blend into the landmass as seen on radar. So if you're out in the open ocean, radar picks you up. But if you right next to a cliff or something like that, the radar, those old primitive radars, can't discern between things, and they sort of disappear into the clatter and the noise. So that was one of the countermeasures. And then also, this one is just, okay, increased anti-aircraft fire. The last sentence there, coordinated attack by 2 or more black cats often confuse the enemy, causing ships to disperse. Okay, this whole bit on the progress of the war, I'm going to just skip over. I just want to, or this one, Alan Rothenberg, the same guy that attacked the aircraft carrier at Midway. They asked him to start doing the same against Japanese cruisers, and from here on the torpedoes that they carried became much more frequent. There you can see tender ship. Here is Catalina on a ramp being pulled out onto dry land. And as I say, I'm skipping through the rest of the war to get to the black cats, the Dumbos. Right, this one is quite interesting. The daisy cutter bombs, they call the daisy cutters. So they talk here about the 500-pound bombs, and then second paragraph, much of the ongoing construction at the 2 bases was accomplished at night. To counter this, this is Japanese building new bases. To counter this, the Black Cats modified some of their ordnance accordingly. Ground crews requisitioned a large number of steel rods, ordinarily used in construction. You know, your normal metal that you use in putting concrete, etc. These they wrapped around 500-pound bombs and tied them down with metal straps. Then they extended another rod forward from the impact fuse in the nose of the weapon so it would detonate prematurely above the ground. And then you've got that shrapnel effect because they put a steel rod onto the nose, and let's say you had a 2-meter steel rod, 3-meter steel rod, this thing would explode basically in the air, and with all the extra steel rods wrapped onto it, you make a pretty nasty anti-personnel bomb, and they called that the daisy cutters. Okay, one of the things they did, oh yes, is they took beer bottles and I mentioned Coke bottles, beer bottles, and they would throw it out. It makes a whistling sound and it unnerves the enemy. And this one says, if you read at the bottom, a popular chore, emptying beer bottles to drop on the Japanese. So there you can see the guys doing their duty, emptying the bottles so they could have ammo to throw onto the Japanese. And then this specific one, to read to you, we were hardly underway when Chuck came on the radio asking that we slow up a bit so that he could catch up. He said he was flying on our port wing, but when we looked around, no PBY, no nothing. I called back to say we couldn't see him, and it was then he discovered that the Japanese had chosen the same island to reform for return to their base. Chuck had tried to form up with the enemy, thinking it was us, but no shots were fired, and the Jap Betis and American PBYs returned to their respective bases. I think that guy's got a story to tell his grandchildren. Right. So this one is just on battleships now. The guys, okay, I just want to scroll past that. And then, yeah, the attack on Wewak Airfield. And after this, I get on to the Dumbos. Okay, this guy, unfortunately, I need to read the whole thing to you, but it's worth it. It's quite interesting. Dilworth climbed to 1,500 feet and flew between layers of cloud until he had almost reached the airfield. He was going to attack Wewak Airfield, where the Japanese were based. Then he dropped down out of the clouds and proceeded across the field at 1,000 feet. To his great surprise, he found himself caught up in the landing pattern with enemy planes all around him. They were easy to see because all had their lights on. One was directly ahead of him at a safe interval, while another was only a few hundred feet behind. The PBY had cut the Japanese pilot out of the pattern, and he was annoyed about it. Pulling alongside, he flashed his lights on and off so to signal what he thought was one of his own pilots to turn on his lights. He was so close by this time that the waist gunner in the PBY could see his cockpit lights. Dilworth kept going as if he belonged there. So he formed part of the Japanese flight pattern. When the cat reached the edge of the field, he did not turn with the other aircraft, but nosed over and commenced a run on the ship, which was riding at anchor just off the end of the right runway. Let him go, Dilworth yelled to his co-pilot to squeeze the electric release pickle switch to drop one bomb. All of them, and then, of course, all of the bombs went. And the first bomb hit Wewak Lighthouse and demolished it. The second and third bombs hit the ship. As the cat made a steep turn to the right, the unfortunate enemy vessel was seen to roll bottom up and began to sink. It was a fine sight, etc., etc. And then at the bottom, by the time the astonished Japanese pilots in the landing patterns realized what had happened, the black cat had conducted its business, made its departure, and was swallowed up by the darkness. So those type of things happen. And now I get to the Dumbo part of it. Catalina excelled in one field in the first few months of war, and that was search and rescue. So when the war started, I mean, it was a useless aircraft. The way they used it, and it was just shot out of the sky and annihilated by the Japanese. But search and rescue was always one of its strong points. So there you can see the Second Emergency Rescue Squadron, for example, and it was named after Dumbo. Carl, as you said, you thought it's a Walt Disney movie. It really is. Some squadrons were assigned the primary duty of rescue and were called Dumbos in honor of the Walt Disney elephant character featured in cartoons of that era. And then at the bottom, I wrote there, Dumbo, the cartoon character, was a flying elephant because this aircraft was big and slow. It was seen as, or ridiculed as, a flying elephant. And so that's where the Dumbo come from. Okay, the ongoing struggle between the Allied and Japanese forces to sway the island resident support was often tipped in favor of the Allies by acts of human kindness and understanding of the islanders' need by Dumbo squadron commanders. Remember, talked earlier about the Japanese being very violent to the people that they conquered, and the Allies, to a large extent, just helping the people out, started winning the hearts and minds of the people that were conquered. Okay, when word came down that a particular group or village was having trouble with food rations, the commanders would arrange drops of rice and other staples. Then coast watchers made sure the natives were aware who sent it. So this was all part of the Dumbo part of the Catalina. Right. As I say here in the second paragraph, the key islands in the South Pacific war zone inhabited by friendly natives, led by brave Australian and New Zealand coast watchers. The Catalinas were called on to slip in, sometimes under fire, to pick up survivors of air crashes and ship sinkings. They were asked to transfer the wounded, and so it goes on, etc. So the coast watchers, this is what Wikipedia says about them. And basically what happened here is, especially the Australians, they were very well suited to this. They knew the islands, etc. And they started like a guerrilla movement or subversive movement. They stationed people all around the islands everywhere, which gave reports about enemy ship movements. They were called the coast watchers. But these guys were closest in contact with the different native tribes and started winning the hearts and minds, supplying them, getting information from them, and all that information, they created a whole information network, was passed on to military intelligence, and they knew where the Japanese were moving, when they were moving, and it also formed the basis of, you can say, guerrilla movement. And actually, I would love to do a talk about the coast watchers. Sounds very interesting, except it's outside of the World War II aircraft society. It's not really part of, but it's a fascinating aspect, and the Catalinas were sort of part of this whole thing. Then this guy, VP 54, that is one of the squadrons. Sorry, where do I? Okay, amongst VP 54 exploits while serving the Black Cat cause was the rescue of 52 pilots, crewmen, and fleet sailors. Their commanding officer, Commander Carl Schoenweiss, and his co-pilot was picked up, fighter pilot, etc. So, these guys started rescuing the different people, and when they were down, etc., in the water. I mean, a water plane is very suitable for that. And here you can see some of the artwork of the Dumbos the Catalina used in the rescue role. And for example, Port Stanley, right in the beginning of the war, that first 3 months, the Aussies were caught there. The Japanese were coming very, very quickly. And the Catalinas, well, they thought they've got weeks to get off the island before Japanese arrived. And then it became 3 weeks time that they thought it would take the Japanese, was reduced to 5 days, and the Catalinas did it. They got these things, they were flying sorties up and down, and they got the Australian army basically out, where otherwise they would have been caught by the Japanese. That was at Port Moresby. And then, okay, just the last sentence there. Naval intelligence told us we had made it out, but with but a few minutes to spare. Where they thought they had 3 weeks, it was reduced to 5 days, and they got the last guys out, as I say there, with only a few minutes to spare before the Japanese arrived. So that was in the first 3 weeks. Then just a comment by B-25 skipper, who said, "I've always thought the PBY was the ugliest airplane I had ever seen until I saw you coming in to pick us up. Then I decided it was the most beautiful craft in the world." So yeah, this one just on stall landings. Sometimes, especially in a rough sea, they basically stalled the Catalina and came down rather hard. When that happened, they would pop rivets all over the place, and then a leaky hole and all that. And what they usually did is they had lots of pencils and a pencil sharpener, and they would take the sharp pencil, pop them where the pop rivet was, break it off, sharpen it, next one, and so they would keep the aircraft floating instead of sinking. Now, how do you like this for faith in the Catalinas? This was actually something that was, I don't know if it really happened, but there was a specific request made by Major General Kenny, Commander Allied Air Forces, has reported that 50 P-38 fighters volunteered to accompany B-24s to Balikpapan, knowing they would run out of gas on the return flight. If I would just send 6 or 7 rescued Catalina out to meet them, the pilots were confident they could simply parachute down and get picked up by the cats. Do you know what it takes for pilots to put their lives in hand? You know they're flying, they can't get back, so let's bail out and the cats will come and rescue us. And, that's a hell of a lot of faith, especially when you talk about 50 P-38 aircraft that will be written off and all that type of thing. Okay, so people had a lot of faith in them. But now, as the talk is drawing to a close, the story of the USS Indianapolis, I think you all know of it, or at least heard of it. That was the ship that delivered the atomic bomb, little boy. And it delivered it to where the Angola guy would fly with it, etc. And then second paragraph, on a return voyage, she was sunk by the Japanese submarine I-58. This is the 2nd of August, 1945. Now, for some or other reason, the Indianapolis never sent a distress signal. People didn't know she went down. And part of the story was that nobody kept tabs on her. When she didn't report after a few days, people didn't think it funny. Nobody sent out anything or asked, where is the boat? And now there's the Indianapolis, 1,193 crew, and the initial torpedo attack, and 900 people survived the initial sinking. But now they were drifting in the ocean. Nobody knew they sunk. Nobody was looking for them. And 4 days later, Lockheed Ventura spotted survivors in the water and alerted Dumbo to go and investigate. So Catalina went in and found the ocean just full of people. Now, Lieutenant Marks was the pilot. He set down the aircraft and he actually discussed this with his crew, and they decided to save as many people as they can. It doesn't matter they're just going to load the aircraft. They're not going to fly again. They're just going to see how many people they can, right? They managed to get 56 people onto the aircraft, and they radioed their position, and 7 ships came, helped with the rescue. And there's, you can see there, a total of 316 men survived out of the crew of 1,193. Remember, 900 initially survived the original sinking, and those 4 days drifting there. The problem, if you look at this one, can you see the left-hand photo? That's a shark right there between the guys. In this Dakota Hunter block, you will read about some background of what is known as the largest shark attack ever in naval history. Most of those guys, or a lot of them, were just killed by sharks. It became a feeding frenzy for the sharks, and it's just, yeah, quite a bad story. And part of it, the Catalina could get at least 56 guys onto the Cat. Here's the crew. Lieutenant Marks is 4th from the right. There's my cursor on Lieutenant Marks at the moment. He was the pilot. They got the Congressional Medal of Honor and all that type of thing. Then here is another case where this guy claims, this is from the Dumbo book, where people give their little things, and I'm not always sure how accurate it was, but the second paragraph, they landed the PBY and loaded 114 or 115 men inside the plane, on the struts, on the turtleback, on the everywhere. And now this aircraft was of course way too heavy to fly, so they simply taxied until they contacted an American ship, which promptly took the survivors off their hands. So apart from the Indianapolis, here is, according to this guy, at least 15 people that were loaded onto Catalina. And then the case of Gordon, Lieutenant Gordon, he basically flew, and there were B-24, B-25s that went down, a few aircraft that were shot down. And in the first paragraph there, a raft was spotted just offshore. So the guy landed there to investigate, but heavy seas, and basically he did one of those stall landings. He popped the seams and the rivets, and the Catalina started taking water, but there it was just the what do you call it, the empty life raft. There was nobody in it. So he managed to get this leaking ship back into, or aircraft back into the water. Second, bottom paragraph, once again, then a B-25 saw guys in the water, directed the Catalina. Now, with this aircraft already damaged and leaking, he set down next to the raft, right next to an island, and the Japanese gunners on the island were now firing at this aircraft. It was evident that the B-25 crew could not be hauled aboard the moving aircraft, so Gordon pulled the mixture controls back and the props ground to a stop. He basically stopped his engines whilst they were firing at him. The raft came alongside, and the men were quickly hauled aboard. With slugs sprinkling around the water, he took off and he got the aircraft back into the air. But that's not the end of the story. Another call, more men in the water. He landed a third time with this leaky aircraft, and he got 6 more men aboard. And then as they took off, another people, and he landed again with the aircraft leaking, etc. Now, he said there, with the Japanese firing at him, and this last time he had to fly over the Japanese, over the beach, to be at the right angle to land. he says there, came to, and the badly leaking cat began its takeoff run. The Japanese threw everything they had at the plane to prevent its escape. The black hole plowed through the swells, and basically he got this thing airborne. And the last paragraph, whilst they were flying, they had to, with buckets, scoop the water out of the aircraft, etc. But they kept on flying, and they could get all those guys back. Another guy, Joe Ball, did something pretty similar. And according to this, he managed to get 56 guys aboard, same as with the Indianapolis. And he made the last sentence here, of the first paragraph, the plane required a 3-mile run. 63. 56 survivors plus his crew made 63 people. And he got the aircraft to take off with so many people on board. And so that's basically the end of the Dumbo story, except that what I didn't know, the problem with the books, the people who wrote those books think the obvious that everyone would know, and they didn't really say till right at the end of the book, I realized that these guys were rotated. They would go into frontline, they would act as black cat pilots, and then when their tour of duty was over, they needed a break, they were put on Dumbo missions, and they were rescued. They were taken a little bit further away, and they would do rescue missions, and then they would be rotated back into black cats. So they would do the black cat role, fighting at night, and then become Dumbo pilots, flying basically at daytime and doing rescue, and then back into, so that's the way they rotated these guys. So they were basically the same units. And here's just a little bit on insignia. Stephen, I'm very glad to see you here. And you did the fascinating talk about the artwork on the aircraft. And remember that talk of yours very well. Okay, the Black Cat is not the Marvel comic Black Cat or the peanut butter that we have here. But here are some of the artwork. This is VP-11, Patrol Squadron 11, that started the whole thing. That's the insignia. This is VP-12 with their congressional writing of honor and everything. There you can see VP-12 Squadron, and there's VP-32 and 34. You can see some of the artwork. I think I personally could have done better myself, but never mind. And so that's just some of the artwork of some of these squadrons. And this is just VP-52. Oh, they became known as VPB, patrol bombers. Especially initially, they were just patrol aircraft, and then became bomber aircraft. And VPB-52 sunk 2 submarines, damaged 2 cruisers and 3 destroyers, and sunk over 34,000 tons of shipping, etc. Just as an example of one of these CAT units. There's VP-54, and yeah, that is basically the whole talk. And yeah, so here, as I said, they were, this one rotated up and down. And then nearly the end, just look at that beautiful aircraft. Isn't she absolutely gorgeous? And there's the end. And then for those interested, this is my bibliography and the books I use, and websites, and even YouTube sites, etc. All of this I can burn for you onto a PDF file or something and send it to anyone who's interested. Right, that's my talk. It was, as I said in the beginning, I created the monster. It was a bit, didn't flow nicely. I didn't have time to get rid of the gritty bits and all that, but that's basically the Catalina, the black cats, and the Dumbos. I think you got the idea. That's the most important.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is, well, so thorough, and look, it flowed everything nicely into place for me. We are a little bit of a conundrum now. There's about 5 minutes left. We're going to be bombed out, then we'll have to wait